What if I told you that trying to be a good person might be the most dangerous thing you ever do? Sounds absurd, right? We're told from childhood to be kind, be honest, be moral. But what if that's exactly how you're controlled? What if, in trying to be virtuous, you unknowingly become the villain? George Orwell warned us, not with sirens and smoke, but with pigs on a farm and a telescreen in a bedroom. He didn't yell, he whispered, and the world is still echoing. Let's rewind a bit. You want to be a good person. Most of us do. We want to be fair, helpful, nonviolent. We want to believe we're on the right side of history. But Orwell understood something terrifying. The road to hell isn't just paved with good intentions, it's run by those who believe they're saints. In a time of deceit, Orwell once said, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. Now, ask yourself, how many truths have you accepted without question, just because they came with a smile and a slogan? Being good often means obeying rules, but Orwell saw that the rules can be rewritten in real time. In 1984, truth is flexible. Reality is not what happened, but what you're told happened. And the people clinging hardest to their moral compass, they're often the easiest to manipulate. Why? Because they don't question why they're doing good. They just want to feel good doing it. It's terrifyingly easy to co-opt goodness. The road to the ministry of love starts with a desire to help others. It's like joining a gym because you want to be healthy, and 3 weeks later you're in a CrossFit cult screaming no pain, no gain while flipping tires in the rain. You started with abs in mind. You ended with madness. Trying to be good without thinking critically? Same thing, just swap the dumbbells for dogma. Orwell, born Eric Arthur Blair, understood this firsthand. Raised with the manners of the wealthy and the pockets of the poor, he saw both the self-righteous cruelty of the elite and the desperate submission of the working class. He served as a colonial officer in Burma. At first, he believed he was doing good, bringing order, peace, law, but he soon realized he was just enforcing empire, not ethics, so he quit. And then he did something most of us wouldn't. He voluntarily became poor, took low-wage jobs, slept rough, listened. He wanted to know what morality looked like from the bottom, and what he found was this: the world doesn't reward goodness, it rewards obedience. In 1984, Winston Smith writes in secret, "Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows." What a strange definition of freedom, right? Simple, childlike. But if you can convince someone that 2 + 2 = 5, then you can convince them of anything. Even that oppression is compassion. Even that control is kindness. So here's a question for you. Have you ever done something good that didn't feel right? A post you shared because everyone else did. A rule you followed that hurt someone else. A silence you kept because speaking up would cost too much. That's the paradox Orwell wanted us to see. You can be morally correct and still be morally complicit. When Orwell fought in the Spanish Civil War, he believed he was joining the righteous side, fighting fascism, but what he saw shocked him. Propaganda wasn't just something the enemy used. It was everywhere. Newspapers wrote about victories that never happened. Heroes were invented and martyrs erased. He wrote, "I saw newspaper reports which did not bear any relation to the facts. I saw history being written, not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened." If that doesn't give you goosebumps, read it again. And now think of today. Censorship called safety. Surveillance sold as convenience. Silence praised as respect. You see, goodness can be manufactured. And the best kind? The kind that feels earned. The kind that makes you feel better than others. But Orwell says, be careful. That's exactly where tyranny grows. Inside the part of you that wants to be a hero. Now hold on. This isn't all doom and dystopia, because if you can be fooled into being good, then you can also wake up. The truth is, most people want to do the right thing. That's why Orwell didn't give up hope. He just wanted to warn us, to make sure our kindness came with eyes open. Being a good person isn't the problem. The problem is when you outsource your definition of good to someone else. So yeah, being a good person is risky business. It's not all rescuing puppies and donating to Wikipedia. Sometimes it's about making uncomfortable choices, saying the thing nobody wants to hear, and maybe, just maybe, turning off your telly screen and thinking for yourself, don't worry, we'll get through this together. Just maybe question your next act of kindness before you post it with a hashtag. There is a strange comfort in believing you're on the right side of history, that your actions, your choices, your beliefs are grounded in justice, that you are one of the good ones. But George Orwell, time and time again, warned us of this illusion, because when people stop questioning their own righteousness, that is precisely when they become dangerous. In Animal Farm, Orwell shows us how revolutions are born from injustice, but they don't stay pure for long. The animals on the farm begin with noble goals: freedom, equality, a better life. But as power concentrates, the slogans of justice become tools of manipulation. The commandments of the New World change quietly. All animals are equal becomes, but some animals are more equal than others. And no one notices, because they're too busy believing they're still the heroes of the story. That's the myth of moral high ground. Once you believe you have it, you stop asking if you've lost it. Psychologically, we're wired to protect our self-image, to see ourselves as good. That's why people justify cruelty when it's done in the name of justice. Orwell understood this deeply. When individuals or institutions claim absolute morality, they no longer feel bound by moral reflection. In the name of peace, they wage war. In the name of truth, they rewrite history. And those who raise questions, labeled traitors, heretics, enemies. This isn't just fiction. It's a pattern repeated across revolutions, ideologies, even everyday life. The more certain a person is in their moral superiority, the more dangerous their actions can become. In Spain, Orwell didn't just fight bullets, he fought lies. The lies weren't coming from his enemies, they were coming from his own side. He saw firsthand how the truth was twisted, not to mislead the enemy, but to manipulate allies. Battles were fabricated, victories imagined. Journalists created narratives that fit political agendas, and people, good people, believed them because they needed to believe their cause was still pure. As Orwell wrote, "I saw history being written not in terms of what happened, but of what ought to have happened according to various party lines." It's easy to believe that Orwell was only warning us about fascists or dictators, but that's not the full picture. He was warning us about ourselves, our desire to be right, to be good, to be righteous, and how easily that desire can be used against us. Today, moral language floods our screens. Outrage is currency. Social validation is earned by signaling virtue. But how often is that virtue examined? How often are people punished not for being wrong, but for being inconvenient? This is the new moral battleground, not on the streets, but in our minds and in our feeds. In 1984, Orwell created a world where even language becomes a weapon. Words no longer describe reality, they create it. Peace means war. Love means torture. Truth means propaganda. This isn't just dystopian fiction, it's a metaphor for how moral language can be used to erase morality itself. When governments or movements redefine what good means, they gain immense power, not because they control people, but because they control people's conscience. Once someone believes their actions are righteous, they'll do almost anything and feel proud doing it. So here's the question. When was the last time you questioned your own beliefs? Not the beliefs of your opponents, not the slogans you see on TV. Yours. Can you separate what is good from what merely feels good to believe? Can you hold the possibility that the moral high ground might be a hill built on sand? Orwell never claimed to have all the answers. He wasn't a prophet. He was a man who saw what others refused to see and had the courage to say it out loud. He saw that truth is not just threatened by lies, it's threatened by certainty, by ideology, by the refusal to ask difficult questions. He once wrote, "What is peculiar to our own age is the abandonment of the idea that history could be truthfully written." We live in a time where people no longer ask, "Is this true?" but "Does this fit my truth?" That shift from objective truth to ideological alignment is subtle, but it's everything Orwell feared. So the next time you feel certain, utterly certain that you are good and right and just, pause. Because it's in that moment of certainty that we stop listening, stop learning, and start controlling. And if Orwell taught us anything, it's that control, even in the name of goodness, is the beginning of something else entirely. Something we may not recognize until it's too late. What if the rules you live by, what's right, what's wrong, weren't fixed at all? What if they changed quietly every time someone new took control? George Orwell didn't just write about power. He wrote about what power does to truth and to our understanding of morality. He warned us, the moment someone gains enough control, they don't need to punish your actions. They just need to redefine them. In Animal Farm, Orwell gives us one of the most chilling demonstrations of this. At first, the animals overthrow their human oppressors. They write commandments, moral laws to live by. No animal shall kill another animal. All animals are equal. But over time, these rules are altered, just slightly. No animal shall kill another animal becomes no animal shall kill another animal without cause. And all animals are equal eventually becomes all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The terrifying part, the animals barely notice, because the pigs in power don't change reality. They change language, and language is how we make sense of morality. At its core, morality is a shared agreement, a consensus about what is just, acceptable, virtuous. But Orwell understood that when power becomes centralized, morality ceases to be a social contract and becomes a political tool. It stops being about what's right. It starts being about what's useful to those in power. This is not abstract theory. It happens wherever authority consolidates. Governments, corporations, even social movements. First, they tell you what's moral. Then they punish you for disagreeing. In 1984, the party doesn't just enforce laws, it reshapes thought. Through a system called doublethink, people are forced to believe two contradictory ideas at the same time. Winston Smith, the protagonist, knows the truth. He knows the party is lying, but he also knows that believing otherwise is dangerous. Eventually, he is broken down, until he accepts the lie as truth, until he believes that 2 + 2 = 5. And here's the twist. Orwell doesn't just show the distortion of truth. He shows how people begin to believe that accepting the distortion is morally good, that loyalty is more important than honesty, that obedience is the highest virtue. This is how power redefines morality, by teaching us that integrity is treachery and betrayal is righteousness. History is littered with examples of this shift. There are regimes that punished compassion as rebellion, countries where dissent was treated as betrayal, societies that elevated cruelty because it was labeled patriotic. And each time, ordinary people went along, not because they were evil, but because the system taught them that evil was good. This is Orwell's ultimate insight, that morality is only safe when it's separate from authority. Once morality is written by those who hold power, it stops guiding power and starts serving it. Orwell didn't begin as a cynic. He volunteered to fight fascism in Spain because he believed in justice. But he came home with a wound in his throat and a deeper one in his trust. He saw good men smeared, bad men praised, and lies told by those who claimed to stand for truth. He saw moral clarity replaced by political convenience. From that moment on, Orwell stopped trusting systems. He started trusting individuals, ordinary people with no power, no grand cause. People whose decency came not from ideology but from conscience. There's a line in 1984 that's easy to overlook, but devastating when you sit with it. The heresy of heresies was common sense. Orwell is saying, once power claims morality, even thinking clearly becomes a threat. Because real morality, genuine compassion, truthfulness, humility, is unpredictable. It doesn't always align with the agenda of the powerful. That's why it's suppressed. Have you ever been told that you're wrong? Not because of facts, but because you were asking the wrong questions? Have you ever felt a pressure to conform, not to the truth, but to the version of morality that others demanded you accept? This is how power shapes morality, not by force, but by fear. Not with violence, but with silence. Orwell believed that even in the darkest systems, truth could survive, but only if we protect it. He didn't believe in a utopia. He believed in vigilance. He once wrote, The very concept of objective truth is fading out of the world. Lies will pass into history. And when that happens, morality becomes not a guide, but a ghost, a hollow word used to justify whatever those in power need it to mean. If we want to be good, not performatively, not ideologically, but genuinely, we must reclaim our sense of right and wrong from the institutions that want to define it for us. And that means asking hard questions, standing alone when needed, and resisting the urge to believe something simply because it's popular or because it's safe. It's not always the monsters who destroy societies. Sometimes it's the silence of good people, the looking away, the refusal to speak, the quiet nod of agreement when the truth is being rewritten. George Orwell's most haunting message wasn't just about tyrants. It was about us, the masses, the ones who don't push back, the ones who wait too long, the ones who think someone else will resist. There's a comforting myth we all like to believe, that evil is loud, obvious, easy to spot, that oppression comes wearing a uniform, shouting orders and marching down the street. But Orwell knew better. Oppression doesn't always need a boot stomping on a face. Sometimes all it needs is your silence. In 1984, most people are not villains. They are not torturers. They're ordinary citizens, just like you and me. They obey, they adapt, they survive. And in doing so, they allow the system to thrive. Orwell understood something deeply uncomfortable, that totalitarian regimes don't need to control everyone. They just need most people to stay quiet. Because silence isn't neutral. Silence is consent. Every time someone looks away from injustice, the system grows stronger. Every time a person chooses comfort over confrontation, a little more truth disappears. And Orwell shows that in societies built on fear, the average person becomes the most effective enforcer. Return to Animal Farm. The animals know something is wrong. They see the pigs breaking rules, changing commandments, walking on two legs, living in luxury. But no one speaks. They're afraid, confused. They tell themselves it's not their place, that things will get better, that surely someone else will speak up. By the time they realize what's happened, it's too late. The system has been rebuilt around them, and they are part of it. There's a reason Orwell placed such emphasis on psychological manipulation, because the most dangerous form of tyranny is the kind that convinces you not to resist. In 1984, Winston isn't broken by violence. He's broken by loneliness, by isolation, by the knowledge that everyone else has already given in. He wonders again and again if maybe he's the one who's wrong. He clings to fragments of truth, but he has no allies. And when O'Brien tortures him, the most devastating moment isn't physical. It's when he realizes there is no hope, because no one else remembers what freedom feels like. Today, we're not surrounded by telescreens or forced labor camps, but we are surrounded by noise. Endless information, infinite narratives, manufactured outrage, performative virtue. And in the midst of all that, speaking a quiet, unapproved truth can feel like shouting into a void. Or worse, risking everything. It's easier to stay silent, to post what's expected, to share what's safe. Orwell foresaw this. He foresaw a world where fear didn't come from external violence, but from internal conformity. A world where people no longer needed to be watched because they would watch themselves. Years after Orwell, philosopher Hannah Arendt would describe the banality of evil, the idea that the greatest atrocities are not committed by monsters, but by people doing their jobs, following orders, living normal lives. Orwell made the same point, but more viscerally. He showed that evil doesn't just happen through action, it happens through inaction, through rationalization, through the internal compromise that says, this isn't ideal, but it's not my place. And so the system survives, not through power, but through apathy. Ask yourself, what have you let slide? What truth have you swallowed because speaking it was too costly? What injustice have you seen and ignored, telling yourself, that's not my fight? These are the questions Orwell wanted us to face, not to feel guilt, but to feel responsibility. Toward the end of 1984, Winston sees a woman hanging laundry in a yard. She's singing, a simple, human act. And in that moment, he realizes something, that truth, freedom, and rebellion don't live in slogans or revolutions. They live in ordinary people when they refuse to forget what decency means. But by then, it's too late for Winston. By the end, he's not just broken, he loves Big Brother. because that's the ultimate goal of control, not to be feared, but to be embraced. We might think Orwell's world is exaggerated, that we're far from it, but his warning wasn't about a specific future. It was about a pattern, a process, a drift. And that drift doesn't happen because evil is strong. It happens because we are quiet. The real threat is not what power does to us, it's what we allow it to do, by staying still, by staying silent, by staying safe. And that brings us to the final question. If being good means nothing without awareness, then what does it really mean to be a good person? So, what does it really mean to be a good person when the world around you constantly redefines what good is? What does goodness look like when truth is unstable, when morality is manipulated, when silence is safer than resistance? George Orwell never gave us a guidebook. What he gave us was something far more powerful, a mirror. He asked us to look into it, and to ask not how to look good, but how to be good in a world where even that word has been hijacked. Orwell's warning wasn't just about totalitarianism or censorship or government surveillance. It was about ourselves, about how easily we surrender our conscience when comfort is offered, about how goodness, if not grounded in critical thought and moral courage, becomes a costume, a role we play for acceptance, not for truth. In one of his most quoted lines, Orwell wrote, "In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act." But what does that look like practically? It starts with integrity, and integrity begins when we refuse to trade truth for convenience. In an Orwellian world, being a good person isn't about grand gestures. It's about small acts of moral clarity, refusing to repeat a lie, even if it's popular, speaking honestly, even if it isolates you, listening deeply, even when you don't agree, asking questions, even when everyone else has already picked a side. These actions don't make headlines, they don't go viral, but they are revolutionary in a world that rewards obedience over conscience. Orwell believed that language was the foundation of thought. If you control the words people use, you control the limits of what they can think. This is why, in 1984, the party invents newspeak, a reduced, simplified version of language designed to remove the possibility of rebellion. If people don't have words for freedom, they can't even conceive of freedom. So reclaiming goodness begins with reclaiming language, with refusing to accept distorted definitions of justice, kindness, or truth. It means rejecting slogans in favor of sincerity. It means choosing words that illuminate, not obscure. And here's something most people miss about Orwell. He didn't just write about darkness, he wrote about ordinary decency. Despite his despair, Orwell believed in people, not systems, not ideologies, but people. Those who worked quietly, thought independently, lived humbly. He found value not in intellectuals or revolutionaries, but in those who still had the courage to be decent even when no one was watching. In a letter, he once described his reason for fighting as common decency. No utopia, no perfect world, just the quiet dignity of living with honesty, humility, and empathy. Today, being a good person doesn't mean being perfect. It means being awake. It means understanding that truth is not something handed down by authority, but something we must seek, protect, and sometimes fight for. It means knowing that silence, when truth is under attack, is not neutrality, it's complicity. And it means resisting the seductive pull of self-righteousness, because goodness without humility becomes dogma, and dogma, Orwell showed us, can become tyranny. You don't need to change the world to be good, but you must protect the part of yourself that knows what's right, even when everything around you insists that wrong is now right, that freedom is now slavery, that truth is now hate. That part of you, your conscience, your clarity, your decency, is the final line of defense in an Orwellian world. Hold on to it, nurture it, speak through it, because in the end, the paradox of being a good person is this. The more certain you are that you are good, the more likely you are to lose sight of goodness. But the more you question, reflect, and seek truth, not for power, not for praise, but for its own sake, the more you become what Orwell hoped we might all be, not perfect, but honest, courageous, free. Orwell once said, speaking of the terrifying world he imagined in 1984, The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen. It depends on you. And maybe that's the greatest definition of goodness we have left. Not letting it happen, even when it would be easier to pretend nothing's wrong. Thank you for joining today's journey into the mind of George Orwell, and the paradox of being a good person in a world that keeps shifting the definition of good. If this video made you think, even for a moment, then it's done its job. But this conversation doesn't end here. Subscribe to Harystotle for more deep dives into philosophy, psychology, and the hidden forces shaping human nature. Your curiosity is your greatest rebellion. Until next time, stay aware, stay questioning, and above all, stay human.